Why don't people try very hard to make things work anymore? When I was young, it felt like people put in so much effort to keep relationships together. Now, not so much. I don't know. I try very hard to make it work when the issue is something that comes down to differences in perception, personality or circumstances. I don't try to make things work with disrespectful people, or those whose core values and goals go against my own. I work on me. That will echo into and impact any future relationships in healthy ways. I did. But with therapy I realized I can't set myself on fire to keep other people warm. It's okay to do what's best for you even if it means leaving someone you love. Sometimes you are not the right fit and it's time to let go. There are two sides to this. No long ago, women had very little, if any, ability to support themselves. It was also frowned upon to divorce. People fought to save relationships that should have never been saved. People were being cheated on and abused, yet leaving was shameful or financially impossible. On the other side, because divorce has very little stigma in the Western world and women are becoming financially independent, it's easier to leave relationships that bring nothing good. The flip side is that hookup culture and accessibility to dating apps give the idea that there are many available singles out there and people start thinking about the best next thing rather than work on their own relationship. I think in the old days people settled more. But now we know how unhappy that can be in the long run. We need people to work on themselves before you just end up toxic with another person. Women don't have to depend on men financially anymore, which means men actually have to be a pleasure to be with. In a classic sense, families aren't making deals to join houses, which requires using their kids as pawns in arranged marriages. Mental and emotional health are more top of mind these days. Abuse, of all kinds, is something people are no longer ignoring. Less people are tolerating it and staying quiet about it. Divorce is no longer the most shameful thing ever. It still sucks. But being divorced is more acceptable and normalized in society these days. Some people go as far as to celebrate a divorce. Women are more sexually liberated than they've ever been. Women are encouraged to explore their sexuality and have fun. Shaming is still prevalent but not as crazy as it used to be. Women are more educated than ever, and have better jobs than ever before. Women have more options in life because of their skill sets in the workforce. A lot of men have multiple options they prefer to enjoy over getting into a relationship. Even more men are resentful of women because they can't get with any of them. Some people just prefer to be alone, even if they have the ability and confidence to attract a partner. With technology, it's easier for people to entertain themselves and be isolated. Technology in general has made it easier to communicate, while making it easier to keep your distance. In other words, it's easier to ignore or run away from your problems. Ghosting is more prevalent than ever, thanks to technology. Men who are high earners see how the court system favors women, and therefore see marriage as pointless. They see it as a huge risk that is not worth the potential reward. Anxiety, depression, drugs, individualism, and so many other factors play into how people manage relationships. Cause trying very hard requires the effort of both parties, and as it is now, it usually only coming from one, because as you get older, you realize it's better to be alone than to settle for someone who makes your life worse. If you don't improve my life, why am I with you? It's because people find it easier to just move forward. People have realized it's easier to just give up than to continue to exert any effort and waste time on trying to make things work. BC life is too short for relationships. I broke myself trying to save my marriage. 6 years I spent with an abusive. Never again. I don't need a relationship. I'm very happy when I'm single. I've got amazing friends and a lot of hobbies I enjoy. If someone isn't adding value, love, joy, etc. to my life, they really don't have a place with me. My current relationship is the best I've ever had. We've put in the work, but there's mutual love, respect, and fun. If I had tried to work on those other relationships I knew just weren't for me, I would never have found my current amazing partner, smiling face with hearts. because make things work is often code for putting up with abuse. Forget that. It wasn't super long ago that women had no choice but to stay in awful, sometimes abuse and often incompatible pairings because they had no choice. When a lot of people look at couples who fight to stay together, even as recently as grandparents for most folks, you are seeing the tail end of people who were under pressure to stay together even if they are unhappy. For example, my grandmother on my father's side. When she talks about her late husband, my grandfather, she talks about his passing as if it opened her up to being free. She loved him, don't get me wrong, and mourns the loss of her life partner, but when asked if she'd ever date again, she said she just barely has gotten to feel the freedom of being without a man. They worked through their issues because they refused to consider divorce, and I saw so many fights that scared the daylights out of me. Now my grandmother on my mother's side. Her and my grandfather fought sometimes, but if it got too heated, they'd pause and sit down quietly. Eventually, he'd take her hand, and they'd start talking instead of arguing. Through sickness, through health, through all their problems, I never once saw them build resentment the way my other grandparents did or hold grudges the way they did. When my grandfather died, my grandmother on this side talks about how he balanced her, and now with him gone the world makes her so much angrier. My point is, if a person is the right person, you shouldn't have to fight to be in each other's lives or to want to be there for each other. They never become a burden, and the fights aren't fights. They are discussions. If my father's mother could go back, I don't think she'd choose the man she married again, but I know for a fact my other grandmother would. I got very lucky that after cutting many relationships short because they weren't what I wanted, I did find a partner, and again things that were blowout fights with my ex are discussions between us. If I hadn't cut loose the relationships I realized were more difficult than they should be, it'd have settled for misery. I feel this generation struggles with accountability and is quick to point the finger at others instead of themselves. Self-improvement is hard and necessary to become a better you and a better partner. It's hard so people don't do it, and we wonder why we are filled with trust, commitment and attachment issues, because it's easier now than ever to replace a person using the dating apps and social media. One little thing they don't like and then on to the next one. Do people in these comments understand that nobody owes you a relationship? Like you do understand no one is forced to be with you or work things out with you if you're literally making them unhappy, because women can open credit cards and get home loans now so they don't have to stay with horrible men in horrible relationship, because work things out is usually or often male code for put up with my and don't leave me alone since you're the best I could get and don't want to be celibate. You never or seldom hear this from women. You hear this from guys who end up not trying to fix issues by falling back on the good old "but people ain't perfect." So I could be imperfect because I find it comforting to use others' lack of accountability or effort to not do any effort. Sounds good to me. You can't be unaccountable though, that's not what my grandma or mom used to do. Yeah, they weren't happy, but at least grandpa was, and that's what I care about or notice. Wait, their feelings mattered? It didn't seem grandpa cared or was expected to. While with women this isn't a free pass, social expectation from women in this regard is much harsher. The rare women you hear this from are women with miserable marriages/relationships, often for financial convenience, and as such become the toxic women some guys get, since most guys want the traditional dynamic where women chose them for other reasons besides attraction or like. The guys who land the toxic women tend to be the guys that I mentioned, where rules for thee, nay for me, where they attract the women who think just like them. The women choose those guys because they think men like this are going to be easygoing, as in not going to ask for what they don't give. The guys never forget it because they think women aren't smart to know that dating such men is putting a ton of emotional and mental labor these guys regard as natural, feminine, or just expected of women as a natural obligation, as if it's not learned, whilst the guys aren't not willing to do that in relationships themselves also. These men end up almost offended that they attract what they give. Both are humans who are okay with being flawed humans, but just not okay when there's two of them. Yes, this, I think as I grew older I was able to identify values and traits that I just was unwilling to accept in other people, so if those come out there's nothing to work on because core values are core values and I'm not willing to compromise those things. To add, therapy helps me know what I'm willing to give and where I'm willing to compromise. I had started therapy to be accountable for the ways I was unhealthy and turns out I hold myself accountable for other people's unhealth as well. Same. Therapy is wonderful. This, up-pointing finger, I completely depleted myself and made myself miserable trying to make my marriage work, and be the good, self-sacrificial husband I thought I was supposed to be. It only resulted in more entitlement and expectation from my wife, and very little reciprocation. I came to the inescapable conclusion that things weren't going to change, no matter how much unilateral effort I put in. I think you have a point, however I feel it's so much deeper. I think it has everything to do with Western culture becoming focused on the glorification of the self more than ever before. People in general fail to humble themselves, it is no longer praised. Westerners live in a culture where service to others is no longer celebrated, rather, it has become about self-love and self-gratification. Rather than asking what can I give to others? People think what can I get out of this? How will this benefit me? The irony is, when we seek to self-serve we ultimately end up more empty, less fulfilled. The lack of humility leads to lack of compromise, lack of submission. This modern way of thinking corrupts the very essence of what it means to love one another, thus resulting in failed relationships and marriages. Meaningless and endless cycles of searching. And overall lack of endurance and completion. Everyone says this without actually understanding why. It's not easy, at all, at least for me. Going from being in a relationship with someone who you're probably planning a future with, to starting completely over sounds exhausting and not something I'd jump right into doing. Just my experience though, I take a while to open up and get to know people because life is not an easy thing. People go through hard times, get sick, have ups and downs, etc. People are imperfect. Oof. That moment when you realize, after 16 years, you will never be enough for them, dizzy face, dizzy. Yes, and I think that extra entitlement that comes out because they are unhappy in the relationship. They see you working on it, so they think okay well you really want to make this work, then these are my demands. Make it happen or I'm out. This is one of the things I have learned over time. Once you see that happen it's all done, there's no coming back. That and contempt. If you or your partner are expressing contempt for each other, there's no coming back from that either. It's time to go. I would say the exact opposite. Your view assumes that what makes people truly happy will be bad for others. Taking good care of yourself is just recognizing that only you can fully know your own needs. Then, out of the abundance that you provide for yourself, you can give to others without depleting yourself. It's not the focus on the self. It's the focus on shallow, materialistic pleasures. I mostly disagree because there's always been self-gratification as the center of humanity. The difference is the focus shifted from the gratification of a few, i.e., white rich conservative Christian male, to more people being able to benefit from self-serving ideas. No one should enter a relationship that won't bring them anything good in return. You have to offer something, but you should be getting something out of it. Humans have always been self-centered, even animals seek certain qualities before mating. I'm not saying people shouldn't be altruistic, but seeking some gain it's normal. Straw man argument. You are making it sound like she can't handle a few bumps. When she's talking about a situation where someone adds literally nothing positive to her life. That's not a few bumps, man. Entirely different ball game. That's like having a toxic girlfriend who is always only giving you pain and nothing good whatsoever. No one said it should be smooth sailing all the time. The point is that you shouldn't settle for someone who consistently makes you feel like. Every relationship has its problems, but if that problem can't be solved the relationship isn't worth saving, and it's not fair on anyone to waste too much time and energy on something that is bound to fail. Yeah, dating is just like fast food now. If they see you in person and aren't starstruck, a simple discussion on where to eat makes them want to ghost you. Looks are more important now than they have ever been in history. Agree with this? The people who society no longer bends over backwards to cater to are the first to talk about how selfish everyone else is now. And how we should go back to that great era where everyone cared about everyone. But really they want to go back to a time where they got to live without consequences everyone else had to sacrifice to make things work and keep society going.